Let me ask you a question. What do you see? And now, what do you feel? Captivating artwork has a way of pulling us in and showing us something beyond the canvas, truly a window into the soul. And many cynics can be caught up in the simplicity or the simmering jealousy, thinking, well, I could have painted that. But, simply put, artwork should not be judged by the physical display of what it actually is, but rather the story it contains. And possibly, French Impressionist Edgar Degas said it best. Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. And when thinking of artists, I know the ones that come to mind. Pablo Picasso, Jackson Pollock, Andy Warhol, and the list goes on. But the artist in focus tonight is the story of a man named Bryan Charnley. Bryan Charnley and his twin brother were born on September 20th, 1949, in Stockton-on-Tees. He grew up in London, in the town of Kent Cranfield. He was a part of a loving family. His mother was a devoted homemaker, and his father was a senior lecturer at the university in town. From a young age, Bryan had the passion of an artist, and that only grew as he aged. In his early life, his painting showed promise. He painted a mixture of abstract art and portraiture, and sometimes a combination. His work seemingly features the post-impressionistic style of Van Gogh, with the abstraction of expressionism, a delicate interplay. And with each brushstroke, his skills improved. Everything was going pretty well for the young artist. However, in the summer of 1968, cracks began to form. Bryan suffered a nervous breakdown for the first time, but with the support of the people in his life, he was able to continue his studies at the Leicester School of Art. Afterwards, he was accepted to the Central School of Art and Design in Holborn, London, in 1969. And once again, things seemed to be bright for young Charnley. But as with any peak, there's always a valley. He suffered another severe mental breakdown. Only this one was different. He was diagnosed with acute schizophrenia. He underwent prolonged hospitalization after his diagnosis, and in 1971, he returned to his parents' home and was not able to complete his journey as a student, but continued his journey as an artist. He continued living with his parents for several years, between hospitalization and treatments. However, in 1978, he moved to Bedford and began his career as a painter. Bryan Charnley's work is incredibly introspective. After his diagnosis, it became apparent to everyone, especially Charnley, that he could not separate his illness from his expression. Charnley would incorporate his thoughts into his work, creating surrealist scenarios blended with his impressionistic style. And in some ways, this lent his artwork an insightful and meaningful look into his life. As time went on, Charnley would meet with psychologist Marjorie Wallace, and she encouraged him to continue doing what he loved, painting. Only now, to also keep a journal, to release his thoughts as he did so. And that's exactly what he did. In 1991, Bryan Charnley would begin his last and most memorable body of work, his final series of self-portraits, while his mind also began its final descent. Is it a good likeness? Drug dosage was 2 3-milligram tablets of Dipixol daily, plus 2 25 milligrams of Triptysol. I was sleeping a lot. This painting seems fairly tame compared to even his previous work, which could represent his renewed vigor just after his treatments. But his resolve would clearly begin to waver in the next few portraits. Cut back to 1 3-milligram tablet of Dipixol with trimazepam tablets to get some sleep. Very paranoid. The person upstairs was reading my mind and speaking back to me to keep me in a sort of ego crucifixion. I felt this was because I was discharging very strong vibrations, which could easily be interpreted. I tried to express this in the painting. The large rabbit ear is because I was confused and extremely sensitive to human voices, like a wild animal. I also felt like I was being read generally by ESP. I had cut back to 1 tablet of Dipixol on April 17, 1991, and I was just now beginning to feel the dramatic effects of such a sudden withdrawal. This is the first mention of thought broadcasting by Charnley, and it only continues to worsen. He also is varying his medication from here on. I originally had the idea for a series of self-portraits from Louis Wayne's series of portraits of cats that changed strangely as he became more and more psychotic. They seemed to show a disintegrating ego. I expected something similar, that is the reliance on a sort of hallucinatory geometry, but instead found that I was almost completely unable to concentrate, so the painting takes on the crudeness of bad graffiti. I ascribe this to the fact that Dipixol strengthens concentration, and so its removal means that the power of concentration breaks down. I had come to the conclusion that most people around me had some extrasensory perception ability, which gave them access to my mind. In this respect, I was like a blind man, hence the crosses on my eyes. They also let me know verbally what they had picked up from my thoughts. I was like a dumb man in this respect, hence the cross over my mouth. The crossed out dates are because I was becoming obsessed that I had taken 2 sittings, rather than 1, on the first self-portrait. Why miss a golden opportunity to describe through paint total mental disintegration? Painted after the day of the last portrait, the horns of ESP are supposed to function as mouths. The total lack of concentration meant a graffiti effect again. The spots on the brain of the head are real blood to try and get over the mental pain I was experiencing. I was smoking heavily, hence the pipe. No eyes to see what is really going on, and stitched up mouth. The blood is my own. I stabbed the base of my thumb, not the kind of thing you were able to do on tranquilizers. Still on only 1 tablet of Dipixol and a sleeping pill. but I know I cannot go on much longer. What I find interesting about these pieces is how lucid Charnley remains, yet at the same time is undergoing a complete deterioration, and the self-awareness on his part makes it all the more harrowing. Things had really been getting out of hand. A strange spiritual force was making me feel I should not smoke, or I would incur a disaster. This was driving me crazy, as I'm normally a heavy smoker. I walked and walked, throwing my pouch of tobacco away. I had taken 15 tablets of Dipixol on April 24th to try and throw off the spiritual demands which were driving me crazy, along with the ESP, but to no avail. I kept taking high doses the next few days, but nothing was having any effect, and I felt like I might have to go to the hospital. When I arrived home from one of my long walks, my twin brother phoned me. I told him how I felt, and he said some words of truth that completely cut through the situation to the bone and rendered the spiritual forces thankfully impotent. I wrote to compliment Love Hurts of 23/4/91. Love is strange, because this was the first real help I had been given in my illness. Everybody else seemed to try and make me feel worse. It is also a reference to the statement by Christ that love is the truth. I really wanted to say that truth is power, is beauty, is love, but left it as it is, because I think the song of the same name is so great anyway. The doctors just prescribe more and more drugs when the patients come up with something that they can't handle. What I think is interesting is that the drugs, no matter how high the dosage, has no effect. The doctors, of course, will mutter the drugs just begin to take effect, but I do not believe this for an instant. I believe instead that the answer to my condition is rational insight, but the doctors seem unwilling or unable to help me here. But why should everyone be lumped in the same druggy boat? I am overwhelmed by things I cannot understand. After the mental release, the chemistry of drugs really began to take effect, and though I had now cut back to my dose when I started, I was almost completely without energy. This explains the simile technique. I hadn't the energy for anything else. This is expressed by the pupa, the torpid state in insects. The spirit, expressed by a bird, is crushed by the maggot. My conflict of thought, expressed by the man with two heads, one is a nose. The clothing line is to say that all my dirty washing, or thoughts, are on display. The split crosses are a reference to schizophrenia, being a type of ego crucifixion. The man with the hat is watching me, and keeping everything under his hat. Additionally, the split in the cross expresses lack of real direction, of a split in the will. I feel like a target for people's cruel remarks. What is going on? I had sweet-talked a girl because I had no tongue, no real tongue, and could only flatter. This is very much involved with why I am ill. The nail in the mouth expresses this. The people around me cannot understand how I was so stupid, and cannot forgive me. I can only say that I cannot socialize at all, because of my weakness verbally, and this has produced a tragedy. Thus I am a target. The nails in my eyes express that I cannot see, whereas other people seem to have extrasensory perception, and I am blind in this respect. Love hurts. I keep well away from women now, on the advice of my psychiatrist. The ego splitting like a cancer cell as it comes under attack. A gory mess. The Roman soldier's leg expresses my fear of the mafia, who maintain their tyranny by attaching great importance to the sanctity of a woman's good health and good name, and thus get a foot in the door for murder and organized crime. I also feel Rome was the real decider, and actually crucified the Christ. My ego is being crucified. My feelings. My Oedipus complex is summed up by the leg of an Italian. Italians are very uptight about their daughters, and I injured one through my ignorance of social mores. I am on the wrong side anyway, and cannot hope for anything but total defeat, as the sacred cow must never die. I am a target with no hope of victory, only total humiliation. I completely acquiesce to this, but am still deeply hurt all the time. I've cut down to one antidepressant and haven't been sleeping so much. My mind seemed to be thought broadcasting very severely, and it was beyond my will to do anything about it. I sum this up by painting my brain as an enormous mouth, acting independently of me. The trouble seemed to me, rightly or wrongly, to stem from a broken heart on my left, so I painted a great mass of gore there to express this. The foot that connects to this is pushing the mouth open for the thoughts to be broadcasted. I feel I am always divided against myself by myself. Again, the nail in the mouth expresses my social ineptitude and an inability to socialize, which makes me a target. Still, I feel I am giving off strong personality vibrations, hence the wavy lines emanating from my head. I really tire of having to explain my paintings. It is very much my tragedy that people cannot understand the straightforward poetic use of symbols I am employing. The blue of the portrait is there because I felt depressed through cutting back on my antidepressants. The wavy lines are because just as I felt safe, a voice from the street gutted me emotionally. I was pleased that I was able to express such a purely mental concept as thought broadcasting by the simple device of turning the brain into a mouth that I painted it again. One is very much up against the almost impossible task of describing in paint that which is essentially totally invisible. Yet still, people are too ignorant to see. At this stage, my central worry was thought broadcasting. I was worried about radio and television because I seemed to intertwine with their broadcasted waves and expose myself completely, which I found humiliating. People laughed at me when this happened, or let me know it was for real by acute remarks. I continued my retreat from social contact. Perhaps a broken heart is the cause of it all. Certainly it hurts. This is expressed best as I can on the left side. The spider's legs on the right are to express my inhibitions and the feeling that comes over me as my thoughts surface and broadcast. Scary. I feel all the time now that I'm getting nearer to a more acute expression of my schizophrenia. The spider's legs seem to be my central condition. I attempted to suggest that they radiated out and became less potent as they departed from my brain. The flaming darts of ESP made vocal, and right at the point of the birth of the thought too in this case. The white parts represent my thoughts. The triangles meet to produce the discharge of a rational thought that feels like truth. And a flaming dart from someone pierces it at inception. The spider's legs represent inhibition, social and otherwise. Is this the truth of my condition? I was to find out otherwise, but it was certainly part of the truth. People crane their necks to try and appreciate technique, raving about Picasso's, which is poetic discharge via symbols. They swallow a camel to strain a gnat and say I can't paint, that my technique is at the service of my imagination. Perhaps it should be the other way around, But then I find Picasso peculiar and bland, stripped of his technique. Well, the later paintings anyway. There's nothing wrong with my technique, except when I have to try too hard, because of the demands of the imagery. People keep me in misery, because they keep coming up to me with some gossip about my past, and I know nothing of theirs. The eggs have been emptied like a head stripped of its contents. It has nothing left in it, no more secrets. They went to satisfy somebody's appetite. Some body that has power over me. They enjoyed every tasty mouthful. 2 eggs? It was the same yesterday. ESP horns, voices as mouths grinning. Birds come from eggs, so the crows can also be like my thoughts, flying away. Do they just want to party? An intrusion into my mental interior life, like everybody has a foot in the door. Nailed mouth and tongue tied, I have no effective reply to them. An extremely complicated picture, as I feel I am closing in on the essential image of my schizophrenia. I am transparent, firstly. Make crazy attempts at some sort of control over what has become an impossible situation. The man with the control stick. My brain. My ego is transfixed by the nails as the Christ who could not move freely on the cross without severe pain. My self-respect. My ego. My feelings about me are crucified as the Christ. From here on in, enlightenment about my condition creeps in, and imagery becomes even more difficult to find. I realize that the fear caused by the anger, symbolized by the red-tide beast, muzzled because the anger arises through not being able to reply to the abuse heaped on me. This fear is causing me to hallucinate telepathically. That's why I've been feeling blind all the time. It's because of fear. The anger, being in a latent, unconscious state, but giving rise to paranoia, which in turn gives rise to characteristic schizophrenic hallucinations and symptoms. But I still have an acute disadvantage socially. Can this ever change? Or will the anger always remain? I intend to record my progress, with more self-portraits to add up when they are all joined together, as an important document as to life, at the end of the 20th century. Self-portrait will state with depth what it is to be human and schizophrenic. There is no journal entry for Portrait 16. However, in the center of the piece, Bryan Charnley wrote, "The cards are no good that I'm holding, unless they are from another world." This phrase is a lyric from Series of Dreams by Bob Dylan, the last track on the Bootleg series, volumes 1 through 3. This could represent how isolated Charnley felt while in the depths of his schizophrenia, implying his situation has no positive, unless the world was to change. And after this piece, the next self-portrait that Bryan Charnley would paint would be his last. Bryan Charnley didn't write an entry for his final portrait, but I think it speaks for itself. The lack of any form or recognizable figure portrays a complete dissolution, and in context is everything you need to know. The use of red and yellow seems deliberate. As in Charnley's previous work, it seems to represent acute mental anguish. And with it completely enveloping the canvas, it must have completely enveloped himself at this point. Many believe that this portrait is possibly unfinished. However, Charnley dated this painting, which indicates that he most likely believed it to be completed. Shortly after finishing this portrait, Bryan Charnley was discovered dead in his studio, with this painting sitting a few feet away, still resting on the easel. As sad as Charnley's end was, his story undoubtedly showcased the struggles of mental illness in a way few others could. And one message I got from Charnley's story is that life is a tough thing, and many of us have struggles that no one knows. However, everyone has a story that no one else can tell, and when someone's gone, everyone will lament on the story that they told with their life. But everyone will also always wonder, what story could have come next if things were different? Good night, everyone. See you in the next one.